I'm going to borrow from Frank Legg's paper a minute, this nice little illustration. This is for one of the towers, but the same thing applies at Building 7. If you have a block of floors, including the roof, falling onto columns and concrete, hundreds of thousands of tons of mass, and then this one falling just freely, right? Nothing, somehow we've moved stuff out of the way. We'll talk about that, but it's not just the support columns, it's also the mass. The mass alone will slow down so that you cannot accelerate at g, which is the acceleration due to gravity. You understand? Students, rest? Okay. So let me ask you, which of these two roofs, the one on the left or the one on the right, will fall more slowly? This is not a trick question. The one on the left will fall more slowly. And why is that? Okay, I hear several answers, and I'll help you. Inertia, well, yes, conservation. Something in the way is the easiest way to put it. It boils down to conservation momentum. When a moving mass hits another mass, it slows down. It's conservation of momentum. And the third law will get you the same answer. Newton's third law, there's an upward force applied to something that hits this object with a downward force. There's also an upward force. So obviously, to get free fall, somehow you must have moved hundreds of thousands of tons of material out of the way. Now, fires will burn up paper and desks and so on. Will they burn up concrete? No, not just unlikely. No, the answer is easy. How about steel? Will they vaporize steel? No. So how do you, let's think just for a minute, how do we move thousands of tons of concrete and steel out of the way, or at least get it falling at the same time so that the roof is unimpeded, you see? How do we do that? Explosive. No, it's not magic. No. It's explosives, right? That's one way to do it. And indeed, if you look at controlled demolition, where explosives are used, so you cut columns below the roof line, the roof indeed falls at close to acceleration due to gravity, g, just as World Trade Center 7. How do you get the mass out of the way? Now, NIST does not answer. We basically pushed them to include this plot because we challenged them, David Chandler and I, and they did it to their credit. But then you'd say, well, they would have to explain it, right? They're explaining the collapse of the buildings, but they didn't. They just put a little statement in there. They said that this result is consistent with the results, that's where I start quoting, consistent with the results of the global collapse analysis, that means their computer model, discussed in Chapter 12. That's it. It's a sham. I hope you understand that as a scientist, I'm offended by this type of covering things up. I mean, we challenged them. They admitted free fall for Building 7. Free fall for some 32 meters, over 100 feet. And then you're waiting for them to say, well, fires won't do this. But instead they just say, oh, it's consistent with our computer model, which we won't let you have, which you can't test. You can't see if it's consistent or not. You just have to trust us. That's the fact that in Building 7, Professor Barnett et al. At Worcester Polytechnic Institute noted that the steel was severely eroded, high temperature corrosion and sulfidation, which again, Richard Gage talked about that. Do office material fires do this to steel beams? The answer is no. I mean, please do the experiment. Show me wrong. I beg of you. Show me how you can get a steel beam to look like this. Swiss cheese in appearance, burning paper and desk and so on. Kerosene would be the jet fuel in the towers. There's also steel like this found in the rubble of the towers and studied by these scientists at WPI. Now, did NIST follow up on these data? It's in the FEMA report and was published also in a peer-reviewed journal. The answer is no. NIST did not even look at any steel from World Trade Center 7. Not even these pieces that were collected. Again, they ignored the data. They ask us to trust their computer model, that somehow the free fall for over 2 seconds is innocuous, if I can use the term. Don't worry about it. Well, excuse me. There's something very strange going on. I am not just going to believe you that this is okay. But to ignore published data is, again, an offense in science. Okay, students, you're better than that. Let's see, I might say that this effect of holes in steel I was able to achieve quite easily using thermate, which is sulfur added to ordinary thermite. Thermite you can buy on eBay. Sulfur is not hard to come by. You mix them together and you ignite it. I use a sparkler to ignite this typically. And you see the effect is, and I've looked at this with a scanning electron microscope as well. You see the sulfur penetrating the steel very quickly, and it forms a eutectic and it melts its way through. This is not even super thermite, which we'll talk about later. Just ordinary thermite with sulfur added. The steel is cut through, melted, and it has this Swiss cheese appearance. We're able to duplicate that. The WPI scientists also found sulfur in the steel in these samples. Where does it come from? You see, well, we have an experiment that can replicate. In the scientific method, we gather facts, and we then draw our conclusions from the facts, as on the left. In the political method, we start with a conclusion, and then we find what facts will support that conclusion, and we ignore all others, or we simply say, oh, it's consistent with our, our theory that fire can explain it.
In its final report on the destruction of World Trade Center Building 7, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, went out of its way to avoid investigating the use of explosives. Their sole rationale for not investigating explosive use was the supposed lack of sufficiently loud sounds. NIST computed what they claimed would be the minimum loudness of an explosion that could sever Column 79 with a single blast. Then they claimed no observers detected explosions as loud as their predictions.
This size blast would have produced an incredibly loud sound that was not recorded on videos of the collapse, nor reported by witnesses.
On the basis of this artificial threshold of interest, they swept aside all evidence of actual explosions and concluded that no explosives contributed to the destruction of the building.
We did not find any evidence that explosives were used in the collapse of Building 7.
Yet there was voluminous evidence of explosions.
Here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
You heard explosions, like boom.
We just heard one more explosion. That's about the fourth one we've heard.
Craig Bartmer was a policeman who was near Building 7 as it started to come down.
It was nothing I would ever imagine seeing in my life. You know, the thing started peeling in on itself, and I mean, there was an umbrella of crap 7 feet over my head that I just stared at. And somebody grabbed my shoulder and I started running, and the shit's hitting the ground behind me. And the whole time you're hearing thum, 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 thum. So, I think I know an explosion when I hear it.
A few blocks up West Broadway, looking toward the World Trade Center in the distance, Ashley Banfield was conducting an interview for MSNBC.
You were just told by police that you should move out of your...
The mic was set to pick up speech a few inches away. From the involuntary startle response,
oh my God,
we know explosions are being heard. However, listening closely, we discovered that the microphone did indeed pick up the sounds of explosions, but very faintly.